Anna Smith,
Here.
Sade Fashikun,
Here.
Nikosi Nelson,
Here.
Trish Bodie,
Here.
Paul Gautier, Gloria Gonzalez de Lucia,
Here.
Laura Marquez.
Here. It is 6:16 p.m. and with the quorum of the board present, I call this meeting of the Leander ISD Board of Trustees to order. We will move to the citizen comments portion of our agenda. At special board meetings, comments shall be limited to items listed on the posted agenda, meeting agenda, and notice. We are restricted in the ways we can interact with you during this portion of the meeting per our board operating procedures and policy BED local, which states that the board shall not deliberate or make any decisions regarding any subject that is not on the posted agenda. Therefore, please note that this format is not a conversation, not a back and forth discussion, so we ask that your comments respect that limitation, and as such, please refrain from directing comments about an individual by name who would not be able to respond. You have up to 1.5 minutes to address the Board of Trustees, and you will hear a chime when your time is up. Please conclude your comments when you hear the chime. Speaker number 1.
Mike? I appreciate the crazy amount of time you've all put into these meetings, but these time drains should not have been necessary. Radical candor is admitting that Leander ISD made some extremely bad decisions in the past, extremely expensive bad decisions during the last 10 to 15 years, and that some of those decisions landed us here. Radical candor is saying what those decisions were. Radical candor is saying that none of you have children impacted by the vote you had last night, at least not to my knowledge. You voted to reduce services for kids that are not yours, and you need to admit that, if that's the case. That's how it seemed to me, everything I could learn about each of you. Radical candor is admitting that the district is top-heavy in upper-level staff district salaries and other staff salaries. Radical candor is telling the district staff and the board to stop wasting money on school capacity consultants or other extravagant research or expenses, and to stop all actions that could lead to unnecessary renovations or any other extravagance. And here's the key: while you remove basic services from the public elementary schools that you serve. If you're doing that, cut everything else. Everything. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, we will not be doing radical candor tonight. Instead, we will be doing our leading professional learning communities district-wide. Now, Brenda, take it away.
All right, actually, Madam President.
I am so sorry,
No,
Dr. Grissom.
That's okay, that's okay. Madam President, Board of Trustees, Dr. Clark. We are excited to be here tonight to talk a little bit further about what does it look like leading professional learning communities in this district, and what does that look like from your role as a team of 8 and Board of Trustees. And so we're going to do some foundational work tonight and then build upon that tomorrow through the team of 8 training in the morning and then also in the afternoon. So we're definitely excited about that. So bless you, bless you. So as we are kicking off our day and a half together, just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit before we jump in. So just start with a story. So I'm walking in to a kindergarten classroom full of 5- and 6-year-olds, early in the year, lots of energy, right? You've seen those classrooms where kids are just everywhere. Kids are everywhere. And walking in, and I spy 2 little girls that are paired up head to head with each other. And I lean down, I'm like, what's going on? What are we doing? What are you doing? And this one little girl looks at me with these bright blue eyes and starts talking about her goal that she's working on. That she set a goal and she's working on it. It's all about letters because this is early in the year. She's working on that goal, and she's telling me all of these steps that she's taking to work on this goal and how her friend is helping her with that. And of course, I'm drawn into it. I'm like, oh, tell me more. And she takes me and shows me the chart where she is charting her progress on this goal. And just blown away about the excitement that she had around her progress. And that is the power of goal setting. That is the power of our students setting those goals, because it drives behavior and it drives increase in their learning and it drives success. And that's the power of goal setting. So we're going to start here tonight with goal setting. So Brenda, do you mind? So as you think about your role as a trustee, again, thinking about your own goal, what is the most important goal you have set or want to set to positively impact student learning? So you have a note card at your spot. So what is the most important goal that you have set or want to set to positively impact student learning?
A goal for ourselves or for the district?
For yourself. Okay. In your role as a board of trustees.
So do we want to have like one that I have set and then do one that I want? Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'm not going to make you share these yet. Because as we go through tonight and tomorrow, there will be opportunities to come back and refine that as we engage in learning together. So we'll see by the end of our time where you all land with these goals, and how our learning together helps inform them. So now I'm going to turn it over. So don't lose those. Don't lose them. I'll turn it over to Miss Brenda Cruz.
She's going to threaten to take those up for tonight. Okay, so welcome this evening, and as we enter our time together, as Dr. Grissom stated, we're going to be focusing on professional learning communities, and really tonight is all about what I'm going to call level setting to ensure that we are all walking away tonight with a good foundational understanding, because then it allows us to take that foundation and really jump into the work tomorrow when we think about our team of 8 and what is the work ahead for us. So you have a sheet in front of you that looks like this. It says, what is a professional learning community? It matches what's on the slide. So there are 3 really big ideas that represent the core principles of a professional learning community. So the first one we're going to talk about is just a focus on learning. And so this is primarily, when we think about that, it's about student learning. It's really taking that shift from not asking ourselves, what is it we need to teach, but what is it that students really need to learn? So you can see that shift is really focusing on that learning aspect for all of our students. So when we think about that as a system, not just for our teachers in the classroom with our students, but every level of the organization. So when we're going to be talking about some reading tonight from the book, PLC's District Ride, From Boardroom to Classroom. So when we think about that, it's about really a culture that we're talking about. Sometimes when we talk about professional learning communities, we think of it almost as a time of the day. So we talk about, even in our schedules, well, that's their PLC time. But it's not about a specific time, right? It's not like I go to this 145 or 60-minute block and then that's all. It's really about building that culture. What is occurring during that time, and how is that occurring not only with the teachers that are with our students, but at every level of the organization. So that's what we're going to be building on this evening. So we might be thinking through, really, what are some of those best practices that we engage in to help our students succeed? So what are those commitments? What are those goals that we're going to be focusing on to promote that progress? So I just heard the word, we're being held accountable, right? So it's really thinking through, what is it we want to accomplish? How are we going to accomplish that? And so we'll definitely dive into that work. And then what indicators are going to state we're making progress, or maybe we're not? What is it we need to do about that? So that really goes into the 4 questions that you see on the slide as well. So when we think about that, it's thinking about, if I was a teacher, I'd say, what is it I want my students to learn? How will I know that they are learning it? What if they're not? What's happening? What am I going to do if they're not learning it? And what if they already know it? Those are both, questions 3 and 4 are both about intervening. But it's most important to not be thinking about that as a reactive manner. So when we think about our learning model in our system, design, implementation, assess. When we think about design, it's also designing, right, for that learning for questions 3 and 4. So it's not about remediation, summer school, things like that. It's how are we being very proactive about thinking through that for our students, and thinking through it not just in the classroom and the teachers are planning, but what does that look like within our curriculum? How are we ensuring that we're placing that information in our curriculum for our teachers to access? And thinking through how there are different strategies and can proactively address that. There's also on that slide a document of what a PLC is and what a PLC is not. So you'll be seeing, as I'm speaking this evening, you'll see some of those things that I'm speaking to right now. So the second part is about our collaborative culture. So it's a collective responsibility, and that's what I was just talking about earlier. It's not just a time, but it's about how are we each a piece of creating that culture, that it's important that we operate, that we function together, that we build and support each other. So it's thinking about establishing those team commitments. And again, when I'm speaking of this and when we're going to be acting through this, it's not about those characteristics you see, it's not about just the teacher teams, but think of it through your team of 8, even looking at it from a central office, from a campus leadership perspective. It's looking at how are we engaging with purpose. So when we gather together, what is truly on the agenda that reflects student learning? And coming back to, because that is the core principle we're looking for. It's also focusing on shared learning, not just with our students. It's not about just saying what is, how are our students learning, but also how are our adults learning. So because we have to have that continuous improvement cycle to help our educators, if they're at the central office, campus level, it doesn't matter. How are we making that continuous improvement at the forefront to help our students succeed? They're the boots on the ground each and every day. And then, of course, just reflecting. How are we doing with our team goals? How are we doing with our team commitments? And to do that, that's really looking at how are we going to measure that? What's going to be the evidence of that? So, and then finally, our third big idea is focused on results. So as you know, we have an assessment framework. So for a campus that might be looking at common formative assessments, that may be looking at our universal screeners, our state assessment results. But we also are looking at our learning and assessment of our own professional learning. So thinking through, if I am attending professional learning, I'm attending it for my practice with the hope of improvement, right? But I also need to take it just beyond that learning time. So when I come back to the word culture, it's not that I've attended this professional learning for just this time and I leave it. How am I putting it into practice how am I putting it into practice? And then how am I also reflecting on how is that actually working? What evidence am I hoping to see from that? So those are the three big ideas and the characteristics that you're going to be involved in the next day and a half here. So going into our shared learning for tonight. So some of you have had the opportunity to have some of this foundational learning. So we're going to use our book From Boardroom to Classroom tonight, and we're going to do some level setting. So you have either the section in front of you that's been copied for you, or you have the book. So before we actually begin our reading, we're going to debrief this section with a text navigator activity. You also have that in front of you. So if you would pull that out, it looks like this. So before we begin reading, you will see that some of you are going to be summarizers. Some of you are questioners, and some of you are connectors. Okay? So if you're a summarizer, you're going to be really thinking about, as you're reading, what's a concise 2 to 3 minute overview of the content and the ideas presented, and select kind of a short passage or a few sentences or phrases that really are powerful in support of that summary. If you're a questioner, you're going to write down 2 to 3 critical questions the text makes you really wonder about. Think through this as what would the group, your team of 8, need to ponder throughout this work of a PLC collaborative team. And then connectors, what are 2 connections that you can make to other work within our system? It might be documents, it might be the State Board of Education school board training that you have. We're going to be doing some of that actually tomorrow, right? So thinking through what are some of our guiding documents, your role as a trustee. Okay? So everybody knows their role. Okay, so let's begin our reading, and we'll give everybody a few minutes to read pages 7 through 10. You can use your book or you can use the printout in front of you, whichever is preferable. Be thinking through your lens, summarizer, questioner, or connector, and then we're going to come back to debrief and share out. At the end of your reading, would you please connect with the others in your group to discuss? If you're a summarizer, you're going to connect. So that would be Sade, Anna, and Chris. You'll be gathering together to discuss it. So if you would take just a couple of minutes and gather with the rest of your team and discuss your talking points that we'll share out here in a minute. Dr. Grissom, are you joining the questioners, or? It's your choice tonight. Team of 8, if you would take your last 5 minutes, and we'll come back together to share out. Okay, if you would take your final minute, and we're going to share out, and we're going to start just here in just a minute with our summarizers.
Yeah, so we summarized, we summarized the, I will, we summarized the passage as pretty much, first of all, they go to the summary and then the evidence. Yeah. And then, we summarized it as the passage relates to the superintendent and the board modeling and the district leadership team modeling the behavior that should be, that you're asking of the campuses or the educators. And so, in summary, or the specific area was, actually there were quite a number of areas, but said the same thing in different ways. It says, okay, this one, yeah. If the district office can work as a team that models the concepts and practices of a PLC, system improvement will not be a pipe dream. It would be guaranteed. One would find a guaranteed and viable curriculum in place in all schools in the district. First grade will be first grade across the district. The same essential standards will be in every first grade classroom. And then it goes on to have examples of other subjects. And then on the next page, PLC wouldn't have much effect on student achievement if the work is not embedded in the day-to-day culture of the district. Collaboratively agreeing isn't the same as collaboratively doing.
Absolutely. So it speaks right back to that culture. So thinking through what you just summarized, one of the first things you said, if I believe, says is how are we modeling? Like we're modeling at every level of the organization what we would expect to see in our classrooms, right? And so thinking through that it's not just, it's about collaboratively doing. It's not just about collaboratively agreeing. So thinking through, I think of it as saying, so I actually was a teacher in this very building. So when I think about us coming together as a team, it would be thinking through if we are agreeing that this is the best practice for our students, that I'm actually, as a teacher, going out to actually do that work, right? It's not going back in isolation then and continuing to do what I choose to do. So I think that also speaks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it also speaks then to the system consistency that you were referencing. Okay? Any others? Madam President, Dr. Clark? Okay. All right. Thank you, summarizers. I am now going to actually skip down to the connectors. So how does this connect to the reading? And we'll...
We found a couple of different connections. The one that stuck out to me, I asked Dr. Grissom for our core beliefs, our vision, mission, our graduate profile, but looking through these, the core beliefs really brings in talks about the whole system, right? We're talking about community, we're talking about students, we're talking about parents and families, we're talking about every educator in the system. We call it our change makers, right? So being able to see those connections between our documents and what a true PLC looks like, where it's involving like everybody in the system has to be working that in the same way with the same goal. So I saw those pieces. Did have questions, that came up, and I know I'm sorry, y'all. It's not questions. I'm connections. And so there were questions in the different types of connections and where maybe there isn't a connection, where there should be a connection. And so we also discussed that, but I'm going to move it over to Trish.
Yeah, so in here, what you're seeing, or what we were looking at, was that the school board framework talks a lot about your progress and accountability. And so in here is the discussion on how you're going to be focusing on the learning and setting the goals. So similar to the requirements and
Exactly.
the progress measures and the progress monitors, with the exception of, that I would argue, I think this kind of grounds into the why. That gives you, like, you're not just randomly setting some random score of like 4.8 because that sounds good. Like, you're getting information from your teachers. There's like this cycle going on that does that relentless pursuit of progress and accountability in a different format. And so, and then the other part was, we saw there's tons of progress and accountability all in here that talks about the framework, pieces. And then the other part was just kind of this trustee role of like focusing on, like instead of moving beyond meetings where you're gonna fill up the agenda on all department issues and all the great things, that the school district's doing, we're like, yeah, school's got a lot of great things, and there's a lot of things going on now too. There is this call to like really have that focus on learning. And so then that was the connector that we couldn't make, which is how do you go from needing to focus on all the things to really not feeling like you're derelict or abdicating your duties and focus on that learning.
Okay. And I did see when we talk about the State Board of Education, right, the training, the framework basically, is there are those 5 areas, the vision and goals, which we talked a little bit about, right? The progress and accountability, because it's also about collective accountability. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. Systems and processes, right? It's about, we talked earlier about setting those norms, setting those commitments. How do we know? Making those agendas and really holding true to those when it's so easy to get derailed, right, by other, not necessarily always shiny objects, but different topics, right? The advocacy and the engagement piece, to me, is also really thinking about, and that synergy and teamwork, that all speaks to me to when we talk about the culture as well.
Yeah, I think the advocacy and engagement does not preclude the fact it's not just at the legislature, it's with your community. And it's, you know, being able to share the news of what's going on in learning on your campuses and how that's working at our board meetings and when we're out just shopping at HEB.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the culture, I also, in here, it says, you know, we collaboratively develop operating principles. I also see that as synergy and teamwork. Like how do we, goes back to what Gloria was talking about, which is the core beliefs. How are we going to work together?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love just when we think about just the term, professional learning community, I love the last 2 words. It's a learning community, regardless if it's your team of 8, a classroom, or if you're just if you're a parent in the community. I'm a grandparent in the community. I'm part of that learning community as a whole for Leander ISD. Okay, questioners? I heard some good discussion happening.
So one of the questions that we talked about was what do we as a board need to be able to set goals that are conducive to a strong PLC? And I'm going to try to refrain from answering our questions. And then
You'll have opportunity. You'll have opportunity.
the second question is how is or how should PLC be reflected in the board's actions and practices with each other, with staff, and with the community? So we were really thinking about those concrete, like, what is our meeting structure? What's on our agendas? What events do we attend? Like really digging into very concrete ways in which that's kind of there's a thread throughout. And then do you want to talk about your last one? What are the barriers to PLC Bright, so that optimal rollout or implementation of PLC? What are the barriers that could exist?
Okay, thank you so very much. That helps really set the foundation of what we're going to be discussing as we go into tomorrow, and really thinking through what are our key actions as a team of 8, or what are your key actions as a team of 8 to truly bring this to life. Okay, so just to kind of recap, we're thinking it through almost what we just read through a theory of action. So we all know that we are here for our students. At the end of the day, we want the very, very best for our students. So what does that look like for our teacher collaborative teams? What is their role in making that happen? So we already have a PLC implementation guide for our teachers that you have seen, that we've been using. We've reported on that they do a self-assessment 3 times a year. But we are also, as we said earlier, we're going to be starting to develop that with our team of 8. What does that look like for your role? Also then thinking through if the teacher collaborative teams, looking at what makes that bright, what are those key actions? Then how does our campus leadership and support help guide and coach and be a partner in developing that? And then what does it look like for our district leadership and support to also play that role? You'll notice that in both of these graphics, the arrows are going both ways, right? They're going both up and down. And that's truly to just represent that the communication, the interaction of this cannot be in isolation. That the information we share, the goals we share, the accountability, whether it's those results that we talked about, those 3 big principles, it's about sharing that back and forth, because that's how we take a look at our system comprehensively. But thinking through the theory of action, so if we want our students to know and to be able to do, fill in the blank, then what is it our teachers need to do? What is it our campus and district support team? What is it we as a team of 8? So we're going to be unpacking that a little bit tomorrow. So this is just a graphic to, again, just to really reinforce what I just said. It's really just built on that culture of collaboration and that focus on learning and our drive for results. If you took out one of those pillars, the strength of our system is no longer present. So each of those pillars represents a bond, a strength to creating what we want within our system. So I love this quote from the book. Coherence occurs when there is a shared depth of understanding about the practice of effective teaching and learning. It's when there's focused direction, intentional learning, a collaborative culture, and layers of accountability. A key aspect of this work is our own internal accountability. Every team in one of those pillars takes ownership of the work at hand. Okay, so I know Dr. Grissom's looking at me like, you're done? I told you I can do this. I can move this. I can move this. So we are certainly looking forward to taking the foundation, what we have discussed tonight. I think you have some great thoughts, you have some great questions that lead us straight into tomorrow with our training in the morning, and then building out what our key actions are for a team of 8.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Before we jump into norms, because part of the work in a collaborative team is establishing norms, we're going to do that, but we started off our night with your note card where you started drafting your own personal goal as a board of trustee. So what I want you to do is, now that we've engaged in some shared learning, we've made some connections, I want you to go back to that note card and just see if there's anything that you feel like you need to change on there, add to. So give you just a couple of minutes to do that. Let you shift back to your spots, and then we'll jump in. do want to do just a quick check-in. Do we need a 5-minute stretch break before we jump in, or? Nope, ready to keep going. Okay. All right, okay, so put your note card to the side. We'll come back to that again. I won't make you share yet. We've been talking about accountability here, right? Okay, all right, so you do have sticky notes at your table, because, what is a conversation with me without some hot dots and some sticky notes? I promise it won't be long. I promise.
She's like, here's that die.
Like, I don't even have them out on the table.
Right.
So what I want you to do, so as we think about norms, so again, living out our reading talked about how this team has to model that PLC leadership and those behaviors. And so that does start with the norms of how are we going to interact together? What does this look like so that we can move the work forward? So, so what I want you to do right now, you just 2 sticky notes. One is on that one sticky note, I want you to write one behavior that you feel like is helping to move the team forward. One behavior that helps the team to move forward.
That we're doing or that we would like to do?
It could be either.
Okay.
It could be either. So one behavior that helps the team move forward. It could be something that you've seen. It could be something that you aspire to. And then on your other sticky note, it is one behavior that you're seeing that is holding the team back.
Can I say that?
I wrote like 3. No, I can't. Can y'all summarize it for me? It was they're the nice ones too.
Okay, it looks like we're mostly done, maybe putting a few final tweaks on that one sticky. So what I just handed out to you is actually taken straight from your board operating procedures. And this is the section on effective governance at the very beginning, because if you recall, we actually went through a process a couple of years ago developing the norms for this team. And as we have added new members, it is always the time to then come back to the norms and just see, are these still the right ones, right? So I did ask you to identify one behavior that would help move us forward and one that is maybe holding us back. So let's start with the positive. I want you to go through first and look at your norms that were already in board operating procedures. And you see where it says Team of 8 will, and as you look through that, I want you to take your positive one, the one that you see would help us move forward. Do you see that represented there? I'm seeing, so the ones that are yes, that's great. The ones that are no, then this is the time for us to talk through, is that something that should be added? So if you have a yes, that's great. If not, I'm gonna let you share what that is and let the group talk about, is that something that should be added?
I don't know if it relates to everybody. I was thinking personal, so I don't even know if it's positive, but I think it's positive. So I'm tired. What I wrote is, what was it? Behavior that'll help move us forward is being more intentional on our board agenda calendar and aligning board short-term goals and long-term goals with that agenda item, so that way the board can get the data they need to be able to track those goals. I told you it was a long one, but that's my intention.
That one kind of ties a little bit into one of mine, which I'll give you, I don't know, you can flip this either way to be positive or negative, but, well, I mean, I could say it anyway. Here I have like not using a structure or having a structure in collaborative
Yes.
conversations. I don't fully see that on here, but to me, it ties into this intentionality around decision-making and collaborative problem-solving.
Yep. That's kind of, yes. Well, remember when
So
we
it's
wrote these
micro, macro,
goals?
maybe?
Yeah, right. We were in the middle of COVID and where it was a little insane and crazy, and we were just trying to keep the peace. I remember making these when we did that, and so I think, we're over that hump. So I don't think they were bad. I think we needed them when we needed them.
No. I think you're absolutely right. Do they reflect us now is
Yeah,
a
that's where
great
I'm like, yeah.
question. And even though we might have things, and I can be like, oh, make space for each other. That's it. That's what you're saying. Maybe it's not what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think you could make anything fit you wanted in here. Does this really reflect us now is the question.
No, exactly. I remember when we made these, we were just like,
Yeah.
putting a Band-Aid over some, just trying to get through those meetings.
Right. And, we have in here that we're going to be prepared for the meeting and actively participate in the monitoring process. But I'm wondering, like, now that I look at that, I'm like, wait, was that what we were trying to get at? And maybe we should be a little clearer, because I'm thinking actively participate in the monitoring process. What are we trying to say there? And then my other one is at the very bottom, where it says that we're gonna, use continuous improvement. We did have the continuous improvement training, so we have continuous improvement tools. And I know we're using them, but our board ops say that we're gonna use them to help us, like, make decisions. And I just don't know if we're actually using those as much. The board will use continuous improvement in setting and reviewing progress at the district. I'm wondering if maybe we should think about, is PLC a better place for this?
I agree.
I mean, continuous improvement can still be there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for moving our discussion and moving our decisions, I'm wondering if PLC is a better fit.
Okay, so we've got a couple of different ideas that are on the table here of things to be added. This is a collective team norm, so I would definitely want to hear from others.
I think an observation to what you were talking about is even before last night, just observing board meetings. Last night you used and I don't know if this is what you mean by a structure, but a couple of times you said, we're gonna start and go around with questions. That was a very simple thing, but I feel like it brings more structure to the discussion. And then there is some building upon those things, but it also ensures that everybody has a chance and that all of your questions or comments are heard. And it didn't seem to make it last too much longer, but yeah.
I think that's an example of a way to create structure. I'm also thinking about clarifying very explicitly, what question are we trying to answer right now? What is the topic that we are discussing?
Mm-hmm.
What is the decision point that we're trying to make? And then making sure that and maybe this is just an example, that like there's somebody who is kind of facilitating to make sure that we are staying focused on whatever the parameters are for that discussion so that we can be efficient and focused in that discussion. And that if there are discussions that need to happen that are offshoots of this is just an example of a structure. I'm not saying we have to do it this way, but like that there's then a placeholder for, a time to have that discussion. But I think that and especially as like a new board member, sometimes I'm just like, it's like ping pong, like, and I kind of have trouble like reorienting and kind of drawing us back to like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish right here? And not that anybody's thoughts or questions are disregarded, but that there's a structure for the conversation or a goal for the decision or whatever it is, so that we're staying focused on that without getting kind of drawn off.
Yeah, I think there's so much information that is brought to you, and how do we even if as we're preparing, I know Jeremy really does try to do this. There's so much information, and it's easy to get caught on this part of it. So how do we put parameters so that our discussion is focused on the most important decision we're trying to make? Is that how I like the word parameters, I think.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I've worked with a lot of educators, and they're really good at structuring conversations and like having charts and like time allotments and not that we need to do that, but I'm just saying like
I don't know. I
it
kind
was
of like
always
where you're
really
going with this.
as somebody who's in a field where we tend to just like go with the wind. It was really nice to like have that structure to like keep us focused. And again, thinking about PLC, that there's almost like a North Star. Macro, there's a North Star, and we're aligning our actions to that within each conversation. What's like our North Star, and how do we make sure that we're continuing to work towards that?
So one thing Janelle talked about when we went to this PLC conference that I like, as soon as she said it, my ears went open. Yes. She said some of the school boards she's worked with, what they did with the presentations is their administration the week before or the Monday of gave them some prompts in regards to what that presentation was. So it kept the board members kind of in their lane, but kind of got your thought process thinking. Because a lot of the times, I know for me, I start hearing y'all, and then one of y'all will prompt something in the presentation. I'm like, wait, that's not the direction I was going. And so I feel like if we could kind of get something like that from administration, I'm not asking for a list of questions and I'm not asking to censor board members, but if y'all can kind of give us some direction where we're trying to go. So one, we're not sending y'all on a wild goose chase with every single data point we want to try to make sense of what's being presented in front of us, but two, gets you where we're at. Right, where are we trying to get at? And so I would really like to start that if possible, like that regular meeting, not the board budget workshop, but the regular meeting.
It helps us stay
in
in our lane
January.
too.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
thinking about how that piece, and then again, like if there are tangential questions, it doesn't mean you have to just like swallow them. Like you can email them, or like there can be like some additional follow-up on that, but I'm gonna stop talking.
Mine was related a lot to that. I talked about sharing the mic, the one question and pass, and I was struggling with this because there was the what we're doing right, but what we could do better in that same regards of, if the mic is passing, Nkosi asks a question, and I have a follow-up question to that question, and we're already on that, right? We're in that space. Then we're gonna come back around. Sade's gonna ask something different. Anna's gonna ask something different, and then I'm gonna be like, okay, back to where we were at. And so there is like that lack of structure. I appreciate us moving and sharing that mic though, and I think that I like that format, but I also think there has to be that continuity in the conversation. The other thing connected to that was thinking about how we're carrying these over into our closed meeting sessions, and how we're doing this and sharing the mic and staying curious and making space and all that, how we're taking the things that we're doing in this space and also doing it in that space. And I think there's room for.
Thank you for saying that. I agree. Third.
Well, and I do think that that actually connects back to one of the questions, actually, Laura, that you brought up from our reading of how do we live out the culture of PLCs as a board here, but also outside of this space, right? So it's in closed session, but it's also even outside. Meeting with families, right? And teachers and admin. Okay, what other ones do you see that, that you wrote down that maybe you don't see represented here?
I think it goes to what we're saying, and I see like shadows, as I said, you can probably make this fit in here, but I think it goes back to what you were saying, was just kind of an understanding or agreed upon of what is it exactly we're doing with this item? What exactly is this agenda item on here for? And if it's an update, then it's an update. But if this is something that is like, if we're gonna vote, what are we voting on? What do we own? What do y'all own, right? It's just to be clear. And I think, man, because he's talked about drivers before, I've talked about drivers. Maybe it doesn't always have to be like that weighted, but like, what's the like North Star? Like, what are we saying is, what are we going to accomplish with this goal? Does that make sense? So if the most important thing here is we get this thing, then let's talk about, are we achieving this thing? And I think that comes from setting those goals in the PLC, and then that structure follows. I see shadows, I just don't see it being as clear.
I think, and then what builds off of that is the one you said that wasn't clear in here, which is like the self-monitoring. So once that structure is in place, it's a lot easier to monitor whether or not you're following that structure.
One thing it's just not as explicit, I think it's here, but it's this idea of is assuming good intentions or assuming positive intentions. It's kind of that moral imperative piece where, and I think we do a good job, but I think calling out that just assume that we're all kind of here for the same reason and that shared purpose piece.
And I want to remind you that when we talked a little bit in the very beginning, when we talked about what is a professional learning community, one of the things they had on there was definitely setting those norms, right, and those commitments, which we're talking about right now, but it's how are we going to reflect on that? So what I just heard is, so if these are the norms that are being established, how often, how will we reflect on that? And within a true professional learning community collaborative team, really at the end of each of their times together, it's how did we do on these? What is it we did very well on? What are our strengths in this? What are the areas that we're going to need to take action and improve upon?
Along those lines, I think norm setting, mainly with my work with teachers when I was a principal, there's a tendency, in general, people don't like to do this sometimes. It's not really comfortable to have these conversations. So it's easy to say, hey, let's just make sure we're on time. Let's make sure we come prepared. But you should set your norms around behaviors that if you do them will help you move to the next level. So what are the things that, as a board, we need to do better so that we can improve our performance and the way we work together. And I'm still caught up on this structure thing because I think there's power in that. And I'm connecting it even to our Friday meetings where you talked, and I'm not suggesting we do this unless you guys would like to do it, but we had a hard time staying focused in our Friday meetings, which is the area and assistant superintendents and myself. I don't know how well you know Janice Phelps, but she can manage some time like nobody's business. She is my assistant. And so we started putting time to things, and sometimes we don't like it. And she's like, we have 2 minutes left, and you have made no progress on this. So there is, and it does help us prioritize. And that was one of the things I wrote is these can all be stated as a good thing or a negative thing. When there's priorities, you get to those first. So we change the order of our agenda. We get the most important things first, so we make sure that if we run out of time, we're not skipping those most important things. And then we put time to them, so we allot it. It's just somehow, how do we prep and organize that a little better, I think.
A board member actually had submitted that in for board operating procedures because other school boards do this timing of agenda items. And when I tell them, we're here till 1:30, they're like, what are you doing? And so, it's something that I would consider doing if it gets us more streamlined and structured, and our administration doesn't have to stay here until midnight, because that's too much on y'all. It's way too much. And let's be honest, those conversations after midnight, we're all just kind of like looking at the clock and just like, when is this going to end? So no, I would like to explore that option with y'all to see what that looks like. I think it would be good for us right now, especially.
I think it would be powerful if we're coupling it with making sure that we're aligned on this is what our agenda is, this is the thing we want to tackle, right? Because if we say, hey, we're going to figure out the budget in 10 minutes and then we're all going to go home, that's not going to work,
Everything
right?
on consent, right?
Yeah, right? No, we just need to, it's not, I don't think that, I just think we need to be realistic in how we're doing. I think if you put the right structure in place, that there could be a lot of power in being like, look, we're coming in, here's the agenda, here's the goal that we're going to do. Let's talk about this as a group and get done in this time frame. I think there could be a lot with it. You just have to, just takes a lot of pieces to go with it. So,
And to build off of what you're saying, I think in order to increase comfort with that kind of setup, having the information ahead of time so that if a board member is unsure, does this fit here or does it not? There's an avenue to ask that question. And if it doesn't, that there's still an avenue for that question to be answered for that board member. Because what I wouldn't want is for board members to walk away feeling like there's big holes for them that they need answered, that there's too rigid of a structure, or there's just not enough time. Doesn't have to be, not that it's too rigid. But that there are those other avenues for both understanding what goes in that bucket and then addressing things that fall outside of it.
I agree. I think there has to be another time for it, but I also think there is reckoning with sometimes you've talked something out. You have talked something out. We've all talked about it, and I'm not going to convince you, Nkosi. You already told me your position. I've already told you my position. Let me tell you my position one more time, maybe a little bit louder. And no, maybe you tell me your position a little bit louder. And you and we can go back and do this until 2 a.m., right? So I do think, and I can walk away and say, well, I don't think that was fair, Anna, because I wasn't done convincing Nkosi. I'm just picking on you, Nkosi. And so I do think that, yes, but, I think that there needs to be clear what is our goal for that discussion. And of course, having some realistic, we're not going to go through this budget discussion in 10 minutes, right? But having an opportunity to ask questions beforehand, having opportunities to continue discussions, maybe with the people that you need to in other spaces. But I still think there has to be a point where we're not here till 2 a.m.
And that, yes, I completely agree. And I think having a lot of transparency where, like last night, it was really helpful for me when admin acknowledged, like, yes, the questions you're asking are important, and we're not going to have those answers for this decision. And so I think that was incredibly helpful, and that level of transparency in those conversations, I think, can help get at that goal too. So again, having those avenues where that discussion can happen, you know, I think to help keep these bigger group discussions on track.
I do think, we run into this thing about clarity takes dialogue, and dialogue brings clarity. There are times when we're in the meeting, and I swear, and I'll just use Nkosi as an example here, is that I'm looking at Nkosi and I'm saying something, and he's like, yeah, da-da-da-da. I'm like, I didn't say that. Here's what I want to say. And so it's not about convincing Nkosi of my point. It's about I'm wanting to make sure my point was heard. And it's hard because sometimes we're going so quick and we've got so many different pieces. If I feel that I have something, I just want to know I'm heard. That's fine. I'm not trying to convince you. I just want to know, that acknowledge part. Like, this is what I'm concerned about. Oh, yeah. Okay, I hear that. I'm not concerned about that at all. Okay, let's go. Right?
It's reminding me of sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. It's reminding me of what you said with when we go mic to mic, we don't finish a thought. And so it makes it harder to like have that wrap up of like, here's where we are on this piece, and then move on. And then we're done with that piece. We're moving on to this piece. And so like, would one of the pieces of structure look like when there's a question about this part of the budget? Okay, now any follow-up questions about this part of the budget get tagged on, and then we move on to the next person who has a different part of the budget that they have a question on. You know what I'm saying?
So I think
I don't
also
know.
what I just thought there, like, so when we're doing those, but when admin is doing those presentations, right? Like last night, I think it was the budget assumptions, and I said, Sade, don't wait, let him finish it. So like now I'm thinking, like, do we ask the questions as they're going through the slide, or do we just let them complete the presentation? Because I'm with complete, that's just for me to process, because I feel like a lot of the times they're going to answer some of the questions. Okay.
My question too is, how do we get our meetings where when we really are focused, most of our meetings is about the learning discussion. There's so many things that end up coming up for us on operations, or there's so many other things that our community, our parents are concerned about, and they're going to find their ways into our meetings because we were elected to represent as well, right? But the focus of all that time really needs to be learning. And so how do we make sure our agendas are not so action-packed? Because if we're discussing enrollment threshold, budget, and a possible consolidation, I don't understand how we could get out of that meeting in 12 hours. I think we still rocked it, right? I mean, those were huge topic items. Like, if you keep trying to pack all this stuff into the agenda, it just seems like we have these high, lofty goals, and we're gonna get it all done in a little bitty living space.
No, I mean, honestly, I feel like that's how it's been since I've been on the board. It's like pack as much stuff you can get in, and I feel like even now as president, right, like I'll try to keep the agenda, and then stuff keeps getting added in, and I'm like, no, stop. And so my hope is when the board, y'all know that I'm gonna die on this hill, and y'all know I will, is to really blow up the board agenda calendar. I know that's a very harsh word, but I'm gonna do that. And really be intentional about aligning the student learning experiences to our long and short-term goals. So then that way, administration knows what we're looking for, what data we're looking for. We're ready to go when we have our superintendent evaluation. So that way, when we get these leading measures update, we're like, where's this going? Help me explain it. And so Chris and I are gonna do this. That meeting in January is not gonna be a meeting like we've had before, because it's gonna be very intentional, and it's gonna be very, really, really kind of start from here as a foundation and go down. So we'll see how it goes.
I do think this weekend, there's a lot of work that is going to help inform that, right? As we're talking about how do we work as a PLC, and how do we set those board goals that help drive all of this. So I want to see if there's anything that maybe as you're looking at these these norms that needs to come off. As you mentioned earlier, like, these were established at a different time and a different place, right? So can you look at those and see, is there something that needs to come off or be revised?
I like the discussions right now in my head as I'm looking at accordingly the team of 8 will. I'm like, yeah, these are good things. Like, I like the idea of making space for each other. I like the idea of being honest and all. My question is, how do we even remind ourselves, like, hey, I mean, it's just nice to see a reminder. And I don't want to stand at the beginning of every meeting and recite our team of 8, here's what we're going to do things. But Girl Scout promise. But I'm wondering, what's a mechanism or way, if we're going to say these things are important to us? Maybe they are, though, too long. Maybe they should be shorter. But what is the mechanism or tool to help, I don't know, hold us a little accountable to actually doing some of these things, right?
Well, and truth be told, I mean, PLCs, what our teacher teams do is they do start with their norms, and they're looking at and reminding themselves these were the commitments that we made to each other. And a lot of times it's identifying what is one that you really need to focus in on as we're here in this space together. Now, I agree, we would need to shorten these because that's a lot to try and process and hold ourselves accountable to, but that is a structure that our teachers do every time they come together.
Another structure is fist to 5 at the end of a meeting of how well did we do on our norms today, and it's just a quick check-in. I mean, it's elementary-ish, and it seems weird as adults, but you kind of rate yourself and see how everybody thinks we did as a group.
We used to put and we still have it, I think it's in there, the debrief, right? You're like, what did we do well today? What should we do different?
We used to do the dots, too.
I had forgotten about that.
Okay, back to the question of, is there anything on here that, that does need to come off because we are in a different place and time? I've heard some things that need to be added, and I'm going to ask Brenda to help me wordsmith some of those a little bit later, and we'll bring that back to you. But is there anything you heard that needs to come off?
1 and 6 kind of seem like they could be combined into, they seem very similar. If we're trying to shorten and be more focused.
So just to be clear, so if we take it off, that doesn't mean it's not important and that we don't do it. You take it off if it's like we do well. Like, I think 7. This is a pretty curious group. You're very engaged. We don't really need to work on that, right? So, I mean, that's a compliment.
I think the curious might be able to, I don't know, you can say it goes as 1, but for me, staying curious is like, why did Gloria just give me that look? And instead of being like, that's not her mad at me, it's like, are we okay? Like, I'm curious. Like, what did I just say? Did I say it right? Like, curious. Like, like you said, don't assume bad intentions. We stay curious with each other.
Yeah.
Since you got that photo the other night. No.
I like to stay curious. I think it speaks to trying to hear something new as well. Sometimes we come in, it's the same topic, and so are you coming in with a position, or are you coming in and you're able to hear something different and new to change maybe your thinking that day?
So number 9, keep away from personalities. I don't know how much I really like that. I get that, but I mean, I know if we're going to resolve a conflict, I mean, I'd rather resolve conflict with Laura being Laura, Gloria being Gloria.
I think what we're saying is saying, when you say you are something, like instead of saying that's your personality, kind of like that's.
It's like focus on the issue and not the person.
Okay, so I've not yet heard agreement around taking anything off.
I wonder if it'd be more helpful to rank them.
Oh, maybe. We could. I'm not doing it tonight. No, I'm not.
Well, I'm just,
Are we gonna rank and then remove something, or are we just ranking them for fun?
well, it sounds like the purpose of removing some is that we want to have a list that's not so long that we can't really manage working on all of them. And so maybe it's prioritizing the ones that we think we want to work on first or the most.
I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that if we're gonna go through that exercise, then that means to me that we're saying we're going to remove the things that are lower priority from the list. Not because they're not important, but because they have, and if we're gonna say, yeah, we want them all to stay, even if they're lower, then I don't wanna go through the exercise of prioritizing them if we're not going.
That is fair. I only was saying that because I don't see this group getting to a place where they want to remove any. And so maybe if we reframe, say, we're gonna pick our top 5 and focus on those.
I'm not sure why we have to though. I could imagine a scenario where this stands as is, and it's just pointing to this at the beginning of the meeting. It could be printed out or whatever, just to ground people in them potentially. I mean, it's just getting to my opinion. If we want to reduce, that's fine. I think it's 9 things I can remember. I mean, I don't think it's a long laundry list.
I have a question. When y'all, so the PLs, like our campus principals, y'all and everybody, how long is y'all's list?
The usual recommendation is not more than about 5.
Okay, y'all, so let's stop overcomplicating stuff, and this is why we're doing this.
So what I propose is that let Brenda and I take this conversation. Let's see how we might want to wordsmith some of the pieces that you wanted to add, and then we can definitely bring that back before you, and we can prioritize and go through that process.
Perfect.
For old time's sake.
Aw, she said I could bring hot dogs.
Oh, we're gonna do hot dogs. Please, I think that'll help us because, I mean, these are great, but that's a lot. Like, we can simplify it and still get the direction we need.
And I think this comes from we're a very thoughtful board that really wants to hold ourselves to a high standard. So when I say that I think we would have a hard time removing them, I think that's actually a positive thing because we're in terms of integrity, I think there's a lot of integrity on this board. So I just want to clarify that.
Number 3 says have an expectation of preparedness for all meetings, but also up in the third paragraph, it says self-discipline of excellence applies to attendance, beginning meetings at times, preparation for meetings. So it does feel a bit redundant there.
All right, we'll take a look at this and then we'll identify a time to bring it back. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, Madam President, for tonight, we are done. Again, as Brenda indicated, this was laying the foundation for the conversation around of how is this team functioning as a professional learning community, but then also leading this work in the district. And so tomorrow we do have Oren Moore from TASB, who is coming to lead Team of 8 and really digging into board goals and developing your plan for addressing those. And then we'll pick back up this work and pull that thread all the way through in the afternoon around continuing to lead the PLC work. Okay?
Well, thank y'all so much for getting us started on this journey. I'm super excited for tomorrow, and I'm never excited for a board retreat, so thank y'all. I'm showing, it's the first one that it's my personality is showing right now, okay? All right, board members, it's 7:50 p.m. and having no further business, a special meeting of the Leander ISD Board of Trustees is adjourned.